Picture three small rocky islands sitting directly at the mouth of the most important 33 kilometers of ocean on Earth. Combined land area less than 25 square kilometers, smaller than most American cities. And for 50 years, Iran poured everything it had into turning them into layered military fortresses. Cruise missile storage bunkers carved into rock, coastal defense radar systems watching every vessel that enters or exits the Strait of Hormuz, fast attack boat launch points hidden in coves along the shoreline, air defense batteries covering the entire waterway. The IRGC commander who oversaw these islands before Israeli forces assassinated him during this conflict publicly announced that their missile systems could target vessels and assets at ranges up to 600 kilometers. 600 kilometers, the entire Persian Gulf from islands Iran seized by force in 1971. Iranian officials called them their stationary and unsinkable aircraft carriers. Chinese military researchers at Sun Yat-sen University published academic papers describing them as Iran's arch defense, 7 islands forming an interlocking defensive network designed to make the Strait of Hormuz impossible for any adversary to control without Iran's permission. On July 15, 2026, the United States military showed up at one of those islands at 6 in the morning in broad daylight and spent 90 minutes proving that these islands were neither stationary nor unsinkable. And here is the part nobody is telling you. The island strikes were not even the most significant thing the U.S. did that week. Not even close. Because what happened at Bandar Abbas 3 days earlier with 3 robot boats that had no crew, no support ship, and no recall button quietly rewrote the rules of how naval warfare works. And the people studying that moment most carefully right now are not in Tehran, they are in Beijing. Before I walk you through the full picture, the islands, the mosquito fleet, the robot boats, the Warthogs hunting speedboats at wave-top altitude, and the one targeting decision that tells you more about the IRGC's desperation than anything its commanders have said on television, hit the like button right now. 2 seconds. It costs nothing. And it tells the algorithm that this kind of detailed, unfiltered analysis deserves to reach people who actually want to understand what is happening instead of watching another 30-second clip of an explosion with no context. Subscribe and tap the notification bell. This is where we decode what the footage actually means. And what it means this week is something that changes the strategic picture of this entire conflict. Here's the version of this story you have been getting from most coverage. The United States is striking targets in Iran. Islands were hit, footage was released, maps were updated. That version is accurate on the surface and completely inadequate in its framing. Because what Central Command executed across the first 3 weeks of July was not a collection of independent strikes against a rotating list of military targets. It was a systematic dismantling of an entire operational ecosystem, the ecosystem that makes Iran's Strait of Hormuz closure strategy physically possible. And every component of that ecosystem was targeted in a specific sequence designed to collapse the whole system, not just degrade individual pieces of it. To understand why that distinction matters, you need to understand what Iran actually built on those islands and along its coastline over the past 5 decades, because the coverage treats these as simple military targets, and they are anything but. The Strait of Hormuz has a deep water channel running through it, the actual navigable route that large oil tankers and LNG carriers use to pass between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. That channel is narrow, constrained, and sitting directly along it at the western mouth of the strait are 3 small islands that Iran has held since 1971: Greater Tunb, Lesser Tunb, and Abu Musa. These islands were not always Iranian. On November 30th, 1971, 2 days before the formal establishment of the United Arab Emirates, the Iranian Imperial Navy seized all 3 by force. 6 police officers attempted to defend Lesser Tunb against 2,000 Iranian soldiers. 4 people were killed. The islands were taken. 2 days later, the UAE was founded, and one of its first acts as a new nation was to protest the loss of territory that would now be permanently occupied by its larger neighbor. For over half a century, the UAE has maintained its sovereignty claim. Iran rejected every diplomatic approach and built. By the mid-1990s, the Federation of American Scientists documented IRGC soldiers on Abu Musa alongside U.S.-made Hawk anti-aircraft batteries, artillery, and Chinese-built Silkworm anti-ship missiles. By March 2025, Iran had installed missile systems on all 3 islands capable of covering the entire Persian Gulf. Ad-Keshm, Iran's largest island in the Gulf, and Hengam Island confirmed struck by Iranian state media itself, plus the major naval base complex at Bandar Abbas on the mainland, and you have the complete picture of what the IRGC built, not individual targets scattered along a coastline. An integrated defensive network designed to monitor, threaten, and if necessary, close the waterway through which roughly 1/5 of the world's oil supply moves every single day. That network is what Central Command just took apart, and the way it was taken apart tells you everything about the strategy behind the strikes. I need you to stay with me through this because the operational detail is where the real analysis lives, and it requires understanding the campaign not as a series of explosions, but as 4 distinct layers of dismantlement, each one designed to collapse a different dimension of Iran's strait closure capability. When you see how all 4 layers were executed in the same operational window, you will understand why this is not a bombing campaign. It is the methodical destruction of an ecosystem. The first layer was the eyes. The IRGC's ability to close the Strait of Hormuz depends first and foremost on its ability to see what is moving through it. The radar networks, the sensor systems, the coastal surveillance facilities that track vessel movements, identify targets, and coordinate the response. You cannot vector a swarm of 20 speedboats onto a supertanker if you cannot see the supertanker. You cannot launch a cruise missile at a vessel transiting the channel if you do not know where that vessel is. On July 13th, Central Command confirmed a 5-hour mission striking military targets across the entire southern Iranian coastline and the island network simultaneously, specifically targeting coastal defense systems and maritime surveillance capabilities. On July 15th, the third wave of strikes that day went after coastal surveillance facilities, command centers, and air defense sites. The IRGC's ability to watch the strait, the foundation on which every other capability rests, was systematically blinded. That was the eyes. Gone. The second layer was the teeth, the missile systems, the cruise missile storage bunkers, the launch sites, the weapons that give Iran's island network its actual striking power against vessels in the channel. On the morning of July the 15th, Central Command conducted a dedicated 90-minute strike package against Greater Tunb Island, Iran's most important maritime fortress at the mouth of the strait. The official statement was specific: precision munitions against coastal defense systems and crews, missile storage and launch sites, 90 minutes of concentrated destruction against a single island's offensive infrastructure, coastal defense gone, cruise missile storage gone, launch sites gone, and this was the first daylight strike of the entire campaign. Every previous strike had been at night or at dusk. Showing up at 6 in the morning in broad daylight is not a tactical necessity. It is a message. We are not hiding. We are not cautious. We are coming in the daylight and hitting your most strategically important island, and you cannot stop us. That was the teeth. Gone. The third layer was the fleet itself, and this is where the story gets genuinely remarkable because the IRGC's most dangerous maritime weapon is not the missiles on those islands. It is not the submarines. It is not the coastal radar systems. It is the Mosquito fleet. Thousands of small, high-speed boats capable of racing at 40 to 60 knots, armed with machine guns, rockets, anti-ship missiles, and in some cases, mine-laying gear. The IRGC commissioned 110 new combat speedboats in December 2021, then 112 more in a follow-on delivery. Their commander publicly stated that speeds have climbed from 55 knots to 75 and 90, with the next generation reaching 110 knots. These boats are not holdovers from the 1980s. They are constantly upgraded weapons built specifically for this environment. The IRGC's entire naval doctrine, refined over 4 decades and tested during the Iran-Iraq tanker war, is built around asymmetric marine guerrilla warfare. The goal was never to defeat the U.S. Navy in conventional battle. The goal was to make the Strait of Hormuz feel like a gambling table for every commercial operator. Iran does not need to sink a tanker. It just needs tanker captains to believe there is a real chance their ship gets swarmed, their crew boarded, their vessel disabled. If insurance rates spike high enough, ships stay home. The strait closes without Iran winning a single military engagement. And despite 6 weeks of strikes, U.S. intelligence reported that Iran still retains approximately 50% of its pre-war Mosquito fleet. Experts quoted in major outlets now call these vessels the driving problem, capable of choking the world's most strategic waterway without formally closing it, which is actually more effective than a formal closure because it is harder to respond to and harder to reverse. The U.S. military's answer to this problem is something that, as an analyst, I find genuinely creative from a doctrinal standpoint. A-10 Thunderbolt aircraft, the famous Warthog, a Cold War ground attack platform designed to hunt Soviet tanks, deployed over the Strait of Hormuz to hunt speedboats at wavetop altitude. The entire airframe is built around the GAU-8 Avenger cannon, a 30mm rotary weapon that fires nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. At wavetop altitude, an A-10 can see and engage speedboats that would be invisible to a high-flying strike aircraft. At that altitude, the pilot can visually distinguish a civilian fishing boat from an IRGC fast attack craft, reducing civilian risk. And with the Warthog's legendary durability, titanium cockpit bathtub, redundant flight systems, ability to fly on one engine with half a wing missing, the aircraft can stay in the threat environment far longer than a more fragile platform would survive. Apache gunships fill the adjacent role, carrying Hellfire missiles with 8-kilometer range, detecting and engaging small maritime targets with their sensor suites. A-10s for persistent low-altitude firepower, Apaches for precision anti-boat engagement, a coverage layer the IRGC Mosquito fleet has never faced in this conflict. That was the fleet, under sustained, persistent, low-altitude hunt for the first time. The fourth layer is the one that genuinely rewrites the rules. And it happened 3 days before the island strikes at Bandar Abbas, with 3 machines that had no crew aboard. On July 12th, 3 Saronic Corsair unmanned surface vessels, autonomous sea drones, navigated into Bandar Abbas Naval Base, Iran's most important naval installation, and struck a submarine and ship maintenance facility. Central Command released 25 seconds of footage shot from inside one of the Corsairs during its terminal approach. The footage shows a yellow maintenance gantry, a Ghadir-class Iranian submarine hanging in a sling beneath it, completely out of the water, undergoing repair. The camera keeps closing in, the image grows larger, and then the screen goes dark. The submarine will not be going back into service. And here is the detail that should keep every naval strategist on the planet awake tonight. It is not publicly known whether a human operator authorized the terminal attack approach or whether the Corsair's autonomous system made that targeting decision on its own. That question, did an American autonomous machine decide to strike a military target in combat without a human pulling the trigger, is one of the most consequential unanswered questions in modern military history. And it was answered, or left deliberately unanswered, on July 12, 2026, in a real operation against a real target. The Corsair's specifications matter because they define what is now possible: 1,000 nautical miles of range, 1,000 pounds of payload, runs at water level with minimal radar cross-section, no crew, no support ship required, at least 300 units built as of May 2026 under a $392 million production contract, awarded barely a year after the prototype was unveiled, prototype to full production in under 12 months. 3 Corsairs were used in the Bandar Abbas strike. All 3 hit the facility, redundancy built in so that even if 1 or 2 were intercepted, the target would still be destroyed. The strategic implication extends far beyond Iran. Every adversary that maintains naval bases on coastlines or in harbors, and that includes China, Russia, and North Korea, just learned that American autonomous sea drones can reach those facilities with no American crew at risk at ranges exceeding 1,000 nautical miles, in numbers large enough to guarantee target destruction even against defended installations. That was the paradigm shift, proven in combat. If this analysis is connecting things for you in a way the headline coverage never has, take 10 seconds. Subscribe if you have not already, hit the notification bell, and share this video with one person who needs to understand what is actually happening in the Persian Gulf right now. This kind of analysis does not spread on its own. It spreads because viewers like you decide it should. Now let me show you the moment that tells you more about the IRGC's actual strategic condition than every press conference its commanders have held. On July 15th, while 3 waves of strikes were hitting Iran's islands and mainland, Central Command reimposed the naval blockade and proved it was real by firing Hellfire missiles into the smokestack of a Curacao-flagged oil tanker called the Belma. The vessel was heading to Karg Island, Iran's primary oil export terminal, to pick up cargo. It received multiple warnings from U.S. forces. It ignored them. The Hellfire into the smokestack is a precision shot, designed to disable the ship's propulsion without sinking it and without killing the crew. The vessel stopped. The message to every other tanker captain in the region was delivered with the mechanical clarity of a missile that did not miss. The blockade is real, the enforcement is kinetic, and the U.S. military will shoot your ship's engines out from the air if you try to run it. Before this conflict, approximately 110 ships transited the Strait of Hormuz every single day. Current numbers are a fraction of that, And every day the blockade holds, Iran loses an estimated $500 million in oil export revenue. No revenue from Karg Island means no procurement budget for replacement missiles, no replacement drones, no salary payments to IRGC personnel, no maintenance budget for whatever equipment survives the strikes. Think about a man we will call Dariush. We do not know his real name. He is a composite, a stand-in for the IRGC fast attack boat commanders whose operational reality these strikes have transformed. 6 months ago, Dariush commanded a unit of 8 speedboats operating out of a cove near Greater Tunb. His doctrine was proven, practiced, and lethal. Coastal surveillance would identify and track an incoming tanker. The island's command center would vector his unit onto the target. His boats would launch from multiple directions simultaneously, converging on the vessel at 70 knots before its escorts could process the threat. He had done this drill hundreds of times. His unit had swarmed commercial vessels, forced crews to abandon ship, and demonstrated Iran's ability to make the strait feel ungovernable to any commercial operator willing to risk the transit. That was 6 months ago. Today, the coastal surveillance system that used to feed him targeting data has been struck. The command center on Greater Tunb that used to coordinate his swarm has been destroyed. The maintenance facility at Bandar Abbas, where his boats would go for repair, has been hit by robot boats with no crew. The missile batteries that used to provide covering fire for his operations have been eliminated. And somewhere above him, at wavetop altitude, an A-10 Warthog with a 30mm cannon that fires 4,000 rounds per minute is specifically hunting boats that look exactly like his. Dariush still has his speedboats, he still has his crew, he still has his weapons. But the ecosystem that made his doctrine work, the eyes that found targets, the command links that coordinated swarms, the maintenance infrastructure that kept his fleet operational, the missile cover that protected his approach, has been systematically dismantled around him. He has a weapon without a system. And a weapon without a system is just a boat. Now zoom out with me because this is the frame that transforms everything. Iran spent 50 years building an operational ecosystem designed to make the Strait of Hormuz ungovernable without Iranian permission. Not one weapon, not one capability, but an integrated network of islands, radar systems, missile batteries, fast attack boats, submarines, coastal surveillance, command centers, and maintenance facilities that work together as a single machine. The machine's output was not military victory. It was uncertainty. Enough uncertainty that tanker captains would not sail, that insurance underwriters would not insure, that commercial operators would not risk the transit, and that the strait would effectively close through economic calculation rather than naval blockade. That was Iran's strategic masterpiece. And what Central Command executed in the first 3 weeks of July was not a strike against any single component of that machine. It was a campaign against the machine itself. The eyes were blinded, the teeth were pulled, the fleet was hunted, the maintenance facilities were destroyed by autonomous weapons, the command centers were obliterated, the economic lifeline was blockaded at Karg Island. Every layer of the ecosystem was targeted in the same operational window, not sequentially but simultaneously, faster than the IRGC could adapt, faster than it could reroute, faster than it could rebuild any one component before the next one was destroyed. The IRGC's commanders called these islands their unsinkable aircraft carriers. The United States just demonstrated that you do not need to sink an aircraft carrier to make it useless. You just need to blind it, disarm it, cut its supply lines, destroy its maintenance infrastructure, hunt its aircraft, and blockade its fuel supply. The carrier is still sitting there. It just cannot do anything anymore. And that distinction between destroying a thing and destroying what a thing can do is the most important strategic lesson of this entire conflict. It is also the lesson that is being studied most intensely right now in places far from the Persian Gulf, because the ecosystem model, distributed coastal defense built around small boats, island fortresses, and asymmetric harassment of commercial shipping, is not unique to Iran. It is the template that China has adopted for the South China Sea, that Russia has employed in the Black Sea, that any maritime power facing a technologically superior adversary would logically reach for, and the United States just demonstrated in live combat in real time with footage released for the entire world to study exactly how to take that ecosystem apart piece by piece until the whole machine stops working. The islands are still there. The rocks have not moved. But everything Iran built on them over 50 years, every radar dish, every missile launcher, every command bunker, every fast attack boat ramp, exists now in a fundamentally different condition than it did 3 weeks ago. And the strait that Iran spent half a century trying to turn into a toll booth under its exclusive control is being contested by autonomous sea drones, wave top gun runs, and Hellfire missiles fired into smokestacks, capabilities that did not exist in combat form until this month. Iran's officials called these islands their stationary, unsinkable aircraft carriers. On July 15th, the United States proved they were neither. And the people who should be losing sleep over that proof are not in Tehran. They are in every capital on Earth that built its maritime strategy on the assumption that distributed coastal defense could hold against American power projection when the moment came. The moment came. The assumption fell. And the footage is available for everyone to study. If this analysis helped you see the strategy behind the strikes, subscribe, hit the bell, and drop your assessment in the comments. Is the Mosquito fleet problem solvable from the air, or does the U.S. eventually have to go into those sea caves? Is the Corsair the weapon that ends IRGC submarine capability in the Persian Gulf? Share this with one person who deserves to understand what just happened to Iran's most important military advantage. The strait is still contested, the campaign is still running, and whatever comes next will execute against an IRGC that has lost the ecosystem it spent 50 years building.